The music scene in the 1970s and 1980s is now the stuff of legend. From disco to the rise of hip hop, punk, and new wave, innovation and artistry dominated pop music. Today's guest was in the middle of it all as a founding member of Talking Heads. He's Chris Frantz, this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University. Joining me as he does every week in the co-host chair is my great friend G. Wayne Miller of the Providence Journal. Each week we talk about big issues with great guests, authors, journalists, artists, and more to make sense of the big stories shaping public life in the United States today. This week we're joined by one of the founding members of Talking Heads, Chris Frantz, who has authored a new memoir, Remain in Love, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, Tina. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jim. It's a great pleasure.
Well, the book, Remain in Love, is just a wonderful read, and it really is a love story to music and to the love of your life, Tina. But let's start with the music. When did you first realize that you had a passion for more than just art, but actually creating music?
Well, began to love music. Some of my first memories are playing. My parents gave me a little portable child's record player. And the first record I had was called Teddy Bears on Parade. And I loved it. I would play it over and over and over. And then Christmas was coming, so I got Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer by Gene Autry, and I loved that very much. But when I actually started to play music was, I think, in the third grade. I was at a good public school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they had a music education program. And what they started us off on, all the kids, was this little instrument, a recorder that was called the flutophone, a little plastic recorder with a bell on the end that was pink. And I started off on that, and then when I got good at that, they said, "You show great aptitude, Chris. We think you should try the trumpet." So I said, "Great." So I started, I guess it was in the fourth grade, I started playing the trumpet, but it just wasn't happening for me. It wasn't working out, no matter how hard I tried. And I tried very hard. I did my lessons, did my practicing every day, but I just didn't have what it takes in here. I think they call that is it the embouchure? Embouchure?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't working out for me. So I went to my music teacher. I was now in the fifth grade. I went to a man named Gene Weymouth, who was a mallet instrument guy and a great teacher. And he said to me, "Yeah, I can see you're having problems, Chris, but I think you have a very good sense of rhythm. What do you say we switch you over to the drums?" And now all I wanted to do was play music. I didn't really care what instrument. And so I said, "Great." And he gave me a beginner's book. And he gave me the little drum pad, which is a piece of rubber stuck onto a piece of wood, and a pair of sticks. And I started practicing, the single stroke roll, then the double stroke roll, then the 5-stroke roll, then the 7-stroke roll, and then the paradiddles and the ratamakus and all these rudiments, drum rudiments I was taught by Mr. Weymouth. And it worked out really well for me because now I'm in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, baby.
And that was a snare drum, your first drum, according to what you wrote in your memoir.
Yeah.
Which again is just so beautifully written, and we'll get into it a little bit more a little later on. You had a band, your first band was called the Lost Chords. Is that correct? And it was a cover band. You did
Yeah,
Beatles and Beach Boys. Talk about that, your very first band.
yes. My first band was called the Lost Chords, and I still love that name very much. Must resurrect it sometime. But the Lost Chords consisted of a bunch of guys that played in the school band along with me, and we were well aware of the Beatles and the how much the girls loved the Beatles and also how great the music was. So we were inspired by that, that great performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. And we formed a little garage band. We played like A Taste of Honey and things like that.
Chris, do you remember the first time outside of the school orchestra, when you first played in front of people, when you first played in front of an audience, and what that moment felt like?
I do very clearly. It was one of the most, how shall I say, highly chaperoned shows I've ever done. And it was in the basement, the youth fellowship of the Fox Chapel Presbyterian Church. And the Lost Chords played, and it was our first show. And it was so exciting to me. I mean, the kids really got excited, even though, I mean, who knows? I wish I had a recording. Who knows what we really sounded like? But the kids got excited, and we in the band were terribly excited. And it was just a wonderful experience, which, it made me think, wow, I could really do this.
So you were a young teenager at the time of Lost Chords, and with that performance and other playing at that time, did you have any sense that you were starting down a path that would lead you toward becoming a professional musician and, obviously a music legend? I mean, again, bear in mind you're 14, 15, whatever it was.
Yes. Well, it was a dream that I had, and I shared that dream with many, many other people across the country and, in fact, the world. That one day I would be in a band, and the band would be famous, and that I would come back to my hometown, and people would like be all excited, and it was a dream that one day came true for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
So in high school, you discovered another passion, which was art. And you thought then of becoming an artist, and that interest and passion in art in high school ultimately led you to apply to and be accepted at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, as it's commonly known. Talk
Yes.
about that. Talk about the path that brought you to RISD, which is where, the next stage of your career began to unfold.
Well, yes, I began to study. I had always been interested in painting, not so much sculpture, but drawing and painting. And I had a very good art teacher. By this time, I was in high school, and he suggested to me that maybe I should go to art school. Now, my parents were very conservative people, and of course, their reaction was, "Oh, well, how will he ever support himself?" And my art teacher, whose name was David Miller, said, "But I'm going to recommend that Chris go to the Rhode Island School of Design because, the Rhode Island School of Design is the Harvard of art schools." And my parents, my father had gone to Harvard Law School. So my parents were like, "Oh, it's the Harvard of art schools." Well,
Oh,
well,
that's great.
yeah. So they allowed me to go there. In fact, my father drove me up for the interview, and we walked all around the College Hill area of Providence, which is very beautiful, historic, has a great vibe to it to this day. And I ended up being accepted and attending RISD, and oh, it was so great. I mean, I met Tina there, I met David Byrne there, I met many people that I'm still friends with who have been very successful. in the arts, and we're all supporting ourselves just fine.
Well, and how? Talk to us a little bit about both those two really important relationships with Tina, obviously, but also with David Byrne. How did you meet, and how did you know that those relationships were going to be so creatively productive?
Well, with Tina, it was like love at first sight. Have you ever experienced that?
I have.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, whoa. And with David, it was more of an artistic relationship, a collaborative artistic relationship, and uh, you know, Tina eventually became my girlfriend. I had to be patient because she had another boyfriend at the time. I had to wait for that guy to disappear. And,
Metaphorically, we know you mean.
yeah,
Because
yes,
this is Providence after all.
yes. Well, yes, Providence was just wonderful. I mean, it was, of course, after 4 years, I had explored Benefit Street from one end to the other, and I really needed to get to New York City, and that's what Tina wanted to do, and that's what David wanted to do. So we were all in agreement about that, and we hoped that maybe we would start a band in New York City. That was, again, that was my dream, and David said, okay. And Tina was not yet convinced that it was a good idea for her to be in the band. She thought, oh no, that's for boys. That's rock and roll is a boys' club. Um, and she was kind of right about that. But in spite of everything, one day she walked into our loft just off the Bowery on Christie Street with a Fender Precision bass guitar. And I was like, hallelujah, because because I knew that Tina, she had never played bass guitar before, but she had played folk guitar, and she had played flute, and she had played English handbells, if you can imagine. She actually played those at the World's Fair in New York City, and among other places. And David and I knew that Tina had a shared aesthetic with us, an artistic aesthetic, that we knew that it would work. At least I knew that it was work. I was quite certain that it would. And it did. I mean, she turned out to be one of the great bass players of all time.
So there you are living in the loft, the three of you, and forming what became Talking Heads. Were you rehearsing and writing and everything in that little loft down in New York City?
Yes.
This is the mid 70s, just to tell our audience.
Yeah, we moved there in 1974. And at first it was just David and I practicing alone. And, you know, trying to create a sound, a new kind of sound, well, a different kind of sound than what people had come to expect from rock and roll, and also different lyrical content than what people had come to expect. I mean, early songs like Psycho Killer and Artists Only and Warning Sign. I mean, those are all, kind of different from what you were hearing radio in those days. And I'm still very proud of all those songs.
Yeah, with good reason. Yeah, can you talk us a little bit through sort of like how did you actually write songs? It's sort of like there's I think the popular image of the artist toiling away and in solitude and coming up with something, but you describe a much more collaborative process.
It was always very collaborative until towards the end. Towards the end, David would come to us with songs that he had, sketches of songs that he had already written. But in the early days, all through up until the mid '80s, um, our songs were composed by jamming, by playing together until we found a bit that we said, oh, that sounds really hip. Let's repeat that a few times until we memorize it. Because in those days, we didn't even have a tape recorder. You know,
Wow.
we would learn stuff and have to, you know, ingrain it into our memory. And
I mean, it sounds like the script of a movie, and maybe it will be a movie. In 1975, Talking Heads opened for the Ramones. That was really the quote unquote birth of the band.
yeah,
And from there, it took off. I mean, for all the reasons that we love and know, the quality of the music, the lyrics. I mean, I remember so vividly listening to Talking Heads for the first time and going, wow, what a band. Talk about how it all of a sudden, the dream you talked about earlier exploded and began to be realized.
well, we were very fortunate to have this little venue, this little rock and roll dive bar called CBGB's. Excuse me. I'll start over. We were very fortunate to have this little rock and roll dive bar called CBGB's just 3 blocks away. And we would go there regularly. And the first time I went there, I saw the Ramones. The second time I saw Patti Smith. And the third time I saw Television. And so I thought, whoa, this place is happening. And so we became regulars there. And when we had enough, regular audience members is what I mean. And when we had enough songs composed, we I went to the owner, Hilly Crystal, and I said, Hilly, we got a band and we'd like to audition to play here. And he said, well, what kind of music do you play? And I said, well, we play in a style of our own. And he chuckled, and I think he'd maybe heard that one before. And he said, well, I could put you on in front of the Ramones on Thursday night, and if it goes well, you can play the whole weekend with them. And I said, great, we'll do it. We didn't even have a band name yet, so we had to hurry up and think of a band name, which a friend of ours, his name was Wayne Z from Chicago, and Wayne had been with us at RISD, and he was visiting, and he knew we were searching for band names, and he said, I was recently reading TV Guide. I mean, who reads TV Guide? But Wayne did, and he said they had a glossary of cameraman lingo for television, and one of the words, terms in the glossary was talking heads, which is the most boring yet also the most informative type of programming. And so we said, talking heads. And we all liked it. Tina liked it, David liked it, I liked it. And we decided to go with that. And because, you know, it didn't connote any particular type of music, really. It might have been a comedy team or an improv group or something like that. But it didn't sound like a heavy metal band or a punk band or anything like that. So we chose Talking Heads. We opened for the Ramones. Johnny Ramone said, yeah, they suck, so they'll make us look good. You know, they can open for us. And now, when it took off was shortly thereafter, Hilly Crystal at CBGB's decided to have something he called a Festival of Underground Rock. And these were all unrecorded bands. And we played at that festival. And I think every band played a few times. And the next thing we knew, our picture was on the cover of the Village Voice in this great article, which said, tired of glitter? Check out the conservative impulse of the new rock underground. And then things just started to roll. And in fact, a couple times we had to put the brakes on and say, no, we're not ready to make a record. No, we're not ready to do a live TV broadcast. Come back in a year. And which drove the record company people crazy. But fortunately, Seymour Stein of Sire Records was patient, and he said it was the most difficult year of his life. but in November, 1st of November of 1976, we signed a recording contract with Sire Records for 5 albums. And also Tina and I got engaged to be married on the same day.
So now you're touring internationally, which is just, phenomenal. Many of us have obviously been at a concert in the audience, but few of us have actually been on stage. Talk about what it is like to perform live in front of a large crowd. What you're feeling, what you're thinking, the role of a drummer. You write very eloquently about all of this in your book.
Well, there's a big difference between performing in a club, with in an intimate situation, to performing to a large audience in an arena or a festival or something like that. In the small clubs, you can look people in the eye and you can gauge their reaction, and it's intimate. In a big venue, like, let's say the US Festival, which we performed at out in California, there were 500,000 people in attendance. And so we were like, okay, heads down, do your thing, see you at the end of the show. because I mean, you instead of responding to individuals, you're responding to this mass of people, and thank goodness they liked us.
Would you for a show like that? So you're an established act now. You're a tight band. Do you still get nervous?
Oh yeah, I get stage fright really badly sometimes, and
Wow.
I found this homeopathic remedy called Gelsemium sempervirens. It comes in those little Boiron tubes, and you put a few of those under your tongue. It's homeopathic, it's all natural, and it just chills you out a little bit so you're not freaking.
Well, so in 1981, Talking Heads went into hiatus, and in that downtime for the band, you and Tina started Tom Tom Club. Talk to us about that band.
Well, Tom Tom Club was a true musical collaboration between, well, of course, Tina and myself were sort of the leaders of the collaboration, but we brought on board two of her sisters, Laura and Lonnie, to sing along with her. We brought on board Adrian Ballou, the guitarist who had been working with Talking Heads. And, David did a solo. David announced he was doing a solo album, which turned out to be the Catherine Wheel. And when he announced that, Jerry said, well, if David's going to do a solo album, I'm going to do a solo album. So Jerry was doing his. Adrian played on all 3, David's, Jerry's, and ours. And he was kind of like the stunt guitarist. And we also worked with a young Jamaican engineer / producer named Stephen Stanley. I think he was only 21 at the time, maybe 22, but very gifted as an engineer. And he was one of the in-house guys at Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas, where we made the first, second, and I think, well, at least the first 2 Tom Tom Club albums. And that record, it was like a gift to us because, Tina and I were feeling a little bit like outsiders at the time, a little bit, I wouldn't say dispirited, but we were challenged by our business situation with Talking Heads. And that album, well, the first single, Wordy Rapping Hood, went to top 10 in every country in Europe and #1 in Argentina and in Mexico. You can sell a lot of records down in South America and Mexico. So we had a smash hit, and all of a sudden, like we had newfound respect from people in the business. And that was really good.
Chris, we've got about 30 seconds left. What are you and Tina up to now?
Well, Tina's writing a new book, her first. I can't tell you anything about it because I haven't seen it.
We'll look for it for sure when it comes out.
I'm working on it. I'm about to begin working on another book, which has nothing to do with the music business, really. And we also have this little thing called Chris und Tina, which is an electronic music project inspired by Kraftwerk. And we hope to get to that real soon.
Well, we will look forward to all of that. In the meantime, Remain in Love is just a great, great read. Chris Frantz, thank you so much for being with us. That's all the time we have this week, but if you want to know more about Story in the Public Square, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit pellcenter.org, where you can always catch up on previous episodes. For G. Wayne Miller, I'm Jim Ludus, asking you to join us again next time for more Story in the Public Square.